right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Acquire and Operate. Kale here. I'm running Dolo today. Kev is on vacation, so we'll see how this goes. And it's a performance wrap, so I guess I'm probably most uniquely positioned to jam on this substance. But let us know in the comments if this is mind-numbingly boring, and we'll never do it again. But here we are. So let's jump in. So as part, I'll share my screen here. So as part 4, if you will, of issue 15, we're going to be diving into a portfolio performance wrap. So we just concluded our 3rd sprint, and that was the tail end of May through the end of June. We operate on a 6-week sprint cadence. And as a quick sneak peek, we're going to jump into the numbers. So we'll look at MRR and active subscribers. We'll then step in and look at our weekly performance against our scorecard. With some kind of commentary and some voice overlay about each attribute. And then we'll diagnose execution. And we're going to do that through the lens of our OKRs from last sprint. And our method involves, here, we're just going to obviously detail the OKR itself. And then we give ourselves an execution score. 4 is outstanding, 1 is god awful. And then a quick reflection diagnosis and some thoughts moving forward. So we'll break down each OKR. And then we'll wrap with achievements and learning. Sound good? All right, here we go. So to jump in, so this is the first time we've disclosed MRR. And again, obviously up until this point, I've said it a bunch, but we've been quote unquote eating our vegetables and getting a lot of foundational things in motion over the first, call it 90 days. And most lower middle market private equity thinks of kind of like a first 100 days as like the big push where momentum, you kind of have the tailwinds at your back to execute as much transformation as you can. So we treat it the same. And a lot of that was very foundational. So getting the support content refreshed, transitioning the support model to our team, refreshing the website, launching the blog, etc. So we've got all our ducks in a row, and now we're starting to be very focused on product roadmap and shipping new features and enhancements to the product itself. And then of course, intentional growth via establishing acquisition loops. So all that substance has been addressed in prior content. And for today, we started and kicked off with MR and active subscribers. And I give you that context because we haven't hit the growth button yet. But all things considered, I think we started at, so we've seen about a 3.5% increase in MRR. So 695 over the trailing 90 days. We're sitting at 15.1K. And we've seen active subscriber growth of about 5%, landing us at 21. So, it's okay, right? I mean, we'll take it. I mean, I think right now, all of our growth is a function of word of mouth and like very loosely managed referral systems. So we've just made a big push with our ambassador program, and that's going to be way more tight knit. But again, this kind of growth is definitely a testament to a word of mouth and a like loosely monitored referral system is not like a very predictable mechanism. So if we want to get to a place where we are achieving some kind of predictable growth rate on a monthly basis, we need to be more intentional here. And the good news is that stuff's all coming into focus right now. That said, if we think about growth relative to our comps, so right now we're averaging about 1.16% growth. And the big thing to note is that that's a net number. So if your churn is at 2%, you got to grow at 5% to achieve 3% net growth. Sorry to pepper you with numbers, but there's some quick math for you. And top quartile for Micro SaaS, or just SaaS generally, but a SaaS firm that's between 0 and 25K MRR is 3%, which nets out at about 36% growth on the year. So if you're growing 30% year over year, you can consider yourself pretty elite amongst comparables. And that's where we need to get to. So we've got a 3XR growth right now. We're sitting at 1.16%. But that is definitely number one on our agenda moving into the next, call it 6 months. Cool. So now if we shift gears a little bit, and I'll bounce in for you so we can see this closer. So here we have a look at our scorecard. So this is weekly performance on a rolling 30-day view. So a weekly scorecard, very common convention in business across any domain, but we look at, and it's just kind of loosely modeled after a funnel, a historical funnel. I know I've spoken a lot about a bow tie, and that being more of the framework that we subscribe to when we think about SaaS growth and revenue and retention and things like that. But the things that we look at are trial signups. So this is obviously the tippity top of the funnel. And then we have achieved onboarded or activated, and we're looking for our trial users to achieve a very specific outcome. Over on the right, we have this as a percentage, and then we have new paying users. And the thing to note here is this is a last 30 days look. So on a weekly basis, we see how we're doing, and we're looking basically at the trailing 30, and then we measure ourselves against the same period. So if we're looking at this month, we measure, cool, how are we doing this month, and how's that compared relatively to the last month? And then we wrap up with churn. Got to obviously watch churn like a hawk. If we look, and then we extrapolate this out to a monthly performance view that's on a year to date. So now we're looking at cohesive months, and we look at performance and trend lines zooming out into a monthly basis. So what are some takeaways here? What's the commentary? So generally speaking, we had a 19% increase in trial signups, and thank God, because we just relaunched the website and fine-tuned a lot of our messaging. And the hope, and this is, I guess, what in the spectrum of possible outcomes, but this is obviously the last thing that you want to see. We were like, all right, what happens if we refresh the website and our trial signups fall off a cliff, and we actually break messaging, or we do worse on the messaging front, and our digital presence isn't as polished? Thank God the SaaS gods winked at us, and we saw a 19% pop, which is looking good. Year to date, though, we're seeing just a general structural decline in trial signups. And this is to be expected, and we knew this coming in, eyes wide. And it's usually the culprit here is just the diminishing return on a channel. So the most conventional one is paid ads, where all of a sudden competitors come in, people start bidding up on keywords, et cetera, and all of a sudden either the unit economics of your ad starts to break or the conversion rate starts to break. But you can kind of assume that acquisition channels might pop for you. They're very difficult to sustain. That's usually kind of a situation where you'll find kind of a honeypot of new users, you'll acquire the new users, and then you kind of have to find new tactics and keep things fresh. So that 15% structural decline was expected. And we're very clear it's because we don't have any intentional growth loops right now. It's mostly word of mouth, as I had noted. And generally speaking, we're sitting at about 32 trial signups a month. Which I think most importantly, and this is probably the biggest takeaway for the performance wrap, it's just not enough throughput. I think as I look back, we focused on onboarding, and we maybe jumped automation with in-app queues, and we had, a thesis around what our definition of achieved onboarding means, and that is kind of getting users to that aha moment, getting them to perceive the brand promise as soon as humanly possible. And that was a thesis. And so we kind of jumped to some automation and some other things, and it's very hard to measure results on those efforts when there's only 32 folks coming through. So said another way, it's like, all right, we had 32 trial signups, 5 achieved onboarded. Okay, well, what was it last month? It was 7 who achieved onboard. It's like, all right, we can't draw any conclusions from that. So I think most importantly, and I say it like I'm remiss and like I have hindsight, but this was all as planned, and it's like now we're getting to the growth part. But I think there is a sliver in kind of the periphery of my mind that wonders we should have just got growth loops going earlier as a function of putting more traffic through our funnel so that we can accumulate data faster and make smarter decisions, or at least have more conviction around those decisions. But needless to say, and I had kind of alluded to this, the last, quarter, call it, we got the tech stack stood up. We've got our support channels totally in place, all that content's refreshed. So now it's time to giddy up on the trial signups, and I'm excited to see that happen. But generally speaking, new trial signups, we're okay with that. We saw a pop from the website, that's great. But to see something interesting now, we need to be more intentional and get some actual growth loops going. So achieved onboarded, and again, and if we just bounce up here, it's just too volatile. So, we've got 2 users achieved at 2, 5, 3, 3, 2, 1. Not enough of a critical mass to be interesting, and not really any kind of consistent trajectory in either way. But all things considered, as a percentage, it's not terrible. Well, it is terrible. 8% is not where we want to be. We want to be at least in the 30, 40, 50%. Ideally, we want to base rates for comps for achieved onboarded, especially with a free trial business model. You want to see this, between 40 and 70%. I would say, and then trial to paid conversion, you want to see it 15 to 20%. So we've got our work cut out for us there, but that's going to be the focus, as I've noted. On to new paying users, again, kind of similar vibe here. And this is a lagging indicator, right? This is the number one thing that is important to the business. Obviously, retention is probably more important, but we have kind of folks who come in, they do a trial, they achieve onboarded, they convert to new paying users. Okay, happy days. But any change that we make in achieved onboarded, we should see that manifest in achieved onboarded, and then ultimately downstream, it'll impact our new paying users. So just as our trial user signups are in structural decline, so are our new paying users. So we're sitting, in a mediocre place, but now's the time, and we're going to start to lift this up, and that should be the headline in these wraps on a go forward basis. Is a good structural incline to our new paying users as a function of intentional growth loops to drive trial users, and then more thoughtful onboarding to improve that achieved onboarded rate. And then trial to pay conversion, yeah, again, we're targeting 12.5%. Right now, we're sitting at 8.5% year to date. So, we've got our work cut out for us. But 8.5% is not something that is like a drop everything and fix onboarding. Like, we can drive traffic to the funnel, accumulate more data, and then be in a better position to make informed decisions. And then lastly, churn. Oh man, I mean, the thing that really always made this business stand out was just elite retention. So we know, I think, on one side, everything is a double-sided coin. Business and I guess indeed life is about trade-offs, right? And so for our portfolio company, the good side of the coin is that there's really robust automations available for our users. You can automate almost all the workflows and get to a place where they're only doing the creative work and the stuff that they like to do. The other side of the coin is you got to get there, which is a function of implementation. And our product touches CRM, touches accounting, touches HCM with managing staff, et cetera. But once we get users over that hurdle and we get them onboarded, retention is really extraordinary. So we have 1.5% churn month over month, which is exceptional. And I've spoken a lot about comps in prior Substack issues, but that was one of the things that just got us very jazzed about the business. And we've come in and we've actually managed to improve churn, which churn is one of the most difficult things to improve. Full stop. That is a dark art. There's some voodoo involved in solving for that. And it's usually a function of product market fit, and meaning that you're missing somewhere on the utility that you're actually providing to users. But for us, churn was elite when we came in. And another wink from the SaaS stars, we've actually made it, the SaaS gods rather, we've actually made a pretty significant improvement, getting it down from 1.5 to 1.07%. And this is definitely a function of a smooth transition to our support model and establishing way more consistent and I guess formal channels, so we can see patterns in the support tickets. We can act on those in the form of product enhancements, content. We did a full refresh of our support content. So this is a good signal that we're on the right track with that stuff. And happy days, happy days, I guess is the headline. So all things considered, before we move on to execution diagnosis, we're happy with the scorecard. We've still got our work cut out for us on achieved onboarded and solving for the onboarding experience and making it totally user-led. That's going to be the biggest nut for us to crack. And we're not seeing enough trial user signups, and we got to giddy up on that. And that is the plan moving forward and is as planned. So I don't think anybody's shaking their head like, we missed anywhere. It's like things are going as planned. You just always want to see growth sooner, early and often with growth. That's always exciting. Okay, cool. So now let's pivot into execution diagnosis. So OKRs, our first objective, and I'll just read this out loud, especially for the listeners, was to achieve a median trial to paid conversion rate of 20% to maximize our return on investment for our investments in the top of funnel, which were forthcoming, right? And I've written a lot about this, but it was basically like, let's expand the aperture of the pipe before we pump more water through it, so to speak. And the key results here were 12.5% trial users who achieved onboarded to build confidence in that thesis. I mentioned that it still very much is a thesis today and it's not inconclusive. And then build and release trial user prompts for the remaining activation goals as a hedge for our thesis above. So things like email sequences, support articles, and then in-app user guides. We gave ourselves an execution score of 3 out of 4. And I think, again, and I'm probably going to sound like I'm kicking a dead horse here, but I think it's important to reinforce the fact that, we just were lacking the required volume of trial signups, period, to make a conclusion either way. Like, ooh, we're on the right track, or holy shit, we're totally off base. And, that's that. I guess the bottom line, you want to be data-driven in everything you do. And to do that, you need to achieve a critical mass. And we're not talking about something that's statistically significant, because you need big numbers for that. But we want to get to a place where it's not just our gut. But with that said, we did have moments of brilliance with achieved onboarded. So I think one month we landed at 12.5%, another month we landed at 16.67%. But again, this is like, the difference between 5 users who achieve onboarded and 2 users and 6 users, and it's just not meaningful. So the focus, as noted, drive trial signups like maniacs. And then let's revisit optimizing onboarding when we can be a little bit more data driven. I think our big takeaway for this, and this was naive, and God bless. I mean, I guess everything's 2020 in hindsight, but it's like, hey, in 6 weeks, let's lift our trial to paid conversion to our total target for the business. And then let's also improve our achieved onboarded to the desired target. And 6 weeks is when I think this is misguided in the sense that you can move fast, right? You're kind of conditioned to assume that all timelines are truncated in micro SaaS, but conversion rates, especially averages, are very difficult to lift. Said another way, to pull the middle up, you need outliers in either way, and you need consistent outliers. So if you're averaging 10 and you hit 12 a couple times, you might lift it up to 11, but to lift it up to 15, you need 20s and 30s and 40s, and you need to hit them and knock them down. So it's very difficult to improve averages. And it was just ambitious. We got above our skis in trying to achieve our goal in a 6-week time frame, especially with conversion rates and especially with stuff that is extraordinarily difficult, like onboarding. So needless to say, we got done what we wanted to in terms of deliverables to the business. So we felt like, that made us above average on the execution side. Cool. Now moving into objective number 2, establish a repeatable customer support model without increasing churn above 2%. So the risk here was that, there were some support tickets that were kind of customization requests in disguise. And that's not scalable. It's like, hey, can you help me do this in the system? We want to empower our users such that they can modify the tool and implement it and configure it to their needs. So we were going to have to kind of, I don't want to say move away or decline that kind of support, but at the end of the day, we needed to diminish our engagement in those activities and find more scalable ways to provide that kind of support in the form of better implementation, guidance, support content, et cetera. And to do that, we had to accept a likelihood that churn might go up, where some users are with us because we provide that type of customization support. And as we start to move towards a more scalable model, we might lose those folks, but we need to because it's in the mid and long-term interest of the business. So kind of a take your medicine situation, but let's make sure that it doesn't kill us or it doesn't get to a place where it'll put us into a coma. In terms of the key results, we had 4 here. First being a thoughtful support and product documentation backlog. We were shooting 460 net new support articles. We use a pretty clever tool called ScribeHow, which is basically just a click-driven screen grab. And you can create SOPs or step-by-step guides in a breeze. It is really a time saver. But we were shooting for 60 net new articles per week. We wanted to establish base rates for our knowledge-based traffic and searches. We wanted to establish base rates for our ticket volume, resolution time, and non-repeatable support tickets. As I mentioned, we've kind of tag those as customization requests. And then on the infrastructure side, we wanted to sunset Zendesk and establish HubSpot as our spinal cord, just our straight up consolidated system of record across all customer touch points and all the data that we like. And we smoked this one. So we gave ourselves a 4 out of 4. As I noted, not only did we not see an increase in churn, we saw a decrease. The feedback from the users on the content has been extraordinary. We've got base rates established all over, and we're just feeling really good. The one thing that I think was a big learning lesson is, God, it's like I don't know how the saying goes, but most project plans are correct. It's just the sequencing that's wrong. And focus creates the space for performance, as a dear friend has reminded me over and over the years. And so our thought was like, hey, yeah, let's transition the support lead from the seller to our team. And at the same time, let's transition tech stacks. Not smart. You don't need to push the pace like that. I think in terms of sequencing, it would have been much more thoughtful to let's transition the support model, preserve or improve the caliber of support that we're providing, and then let's address infrastructure and just have everyone kind of suck it up living in a few systems for a little while. So I think we kind of jumped the gun, and we had some issues with migrating tickets, losing some of the tickets that were kind of the tickets that were submitted midstream when we were transitioning. So it was a little choppier than we'd like. And definitely in the future, it's going to be like, hey, we can only knock down 3 big pillar transformation activities, if you will, at any given point in time. And we need to make sure that none of those are overlapping, because obviously that increases execution risk, which increases sensitivity to errors, and any of that stuff that touches users can generate churn, and that's not great. But I think I'm being nitpicky here. All in, I thought we did a really good job there. And moving forward, this one gets all caps, but laser focus on managing key risks, which then goes on obviously to inform a ruthless sense of priority and sequencing. And I think saying no is probably the most important word. It's like no, or it's like why now? Why now? Why are we doing this? What's the outcome? The 5 whys, the framework, I've kind of hit that one ad nauseum, but we could have been a little bit more thoughtful there. All right, on to objective number 3, a comprehensive understanding of our ideal customers and existing channels for acquiring trial users. The key results here included a quantitative definition of our ICP based on user data and market research, understand how trial users find us by conducting customer surveys, understand how trial users find us by summarizing findings from Google Analytics, which is now GA4, and Ahrefs, which is a very common SEO kind of website traffic tool. And then while we're at it, identify 3x optimizations to our existing channels. And then most important, we wanted to see stable or improved new trial users per week following the website launch. Again, we were scared to death that we're going to release this sexy brand new website and it's just going to be wrong. But that worked out. So execution, again, we rocked this one 4 out of 4. In terms of a reflection, I think the only things to comment on are that, we could have achieved, and this is always a decision, right? And you've got some of the biggest business leaders and thought leaders of all time that have good sayings and mantras around this. Like Bezos is one where it's there's a difference between one-way doors and two-way doors. Two-way doors, you can kind of reverse the decision. So move fast on two-way doors, take your time on one-way doors because you're committed once you make the decision. And you only really need 80% perfect information to move and make decisions. After that, it's big time diminishing returns. Said another way, the difference between 80% perfect information and 90% is not quite as meaningful as the difference between 40 and 80%. So once you get to 80%, for all intents and purposes, move. So that's what we did. But with our ICP analysis, we really focused on firmographics, and kind of getting into the head of who's our ideal account in terms of measurables: number of employees, number of transactions per year, revenue generated. There's a million different proxies, and all that depends on the context and the category that you play in. But once you do have a firmographic, then you need to start to think about the conditions that your ideal customer is kind of experiencing that prompt them to purchase a software or to pay something to execute a job to be done. And so for us, we could achieve another level of rigor with our ICP analysis, because also, and I guess this is connected to that same thought, right? You want to think, okay, this is our ideal customer. Okay, but what's the most productive thing for the business, right? There has to be an intersection there. You might flex a little bit on your ICP because you know that this zone of the spectrum of ideal customer profiles is more likely to buy the higher price package, or we know that their retention is a lot stronger, or we know that they're more likely to be daily active users. So there are a few vectors that all kind of intersect, and that comes into informing a really thoughtful ICP. So we're still we're there firmographically. I feel very confident about where we're going, but we want to start to cross-reference this and start to factor in revenue to the business, pricing plan, etc. Another thing, and for those that are totally active in the game, this will be super useful because it's very common. It was something that I hadn't really encountered, but we thought we had all this interesting organic traffic, and it turns out that the traffic, because our product ends up embedded in our users' URLs. So if you're sending an invoice to somebody, it's going to be SaaS.thebusiness.com, and you're getting that invoice, and that can be misconstrued as organic traffic to your website. So we struggled to decompose our traffic and really understand what was organic, who are actual unique visitors, where were they coming from, etc. So if you're playing in a game or a category, you have a SaaS business in your portfolio where the actual name of the business, the name of the SaaS ends up in the URL for your users, it's going to muddy up traffic, and you're going to have to be taking your time to decompose that stuff. So as I alluded to, moving forward, what does all this mean? Obviously, we're going to build on our foundation in terms of the view of our ICP. And the main thing we're going to do there is laying in revenue and product usage dimensions. And then lastly, we realize that this is, as I've noted in the past, is a very community influenced buyer journey. So it's very, and I guess most buyer journeys are, maybe the root lesson, that this is less the nuance of the category that we're playing in, more an evolution of buyer behavior. But you're going to buy something, you go to the networks you belong to. So you jump into a Facebook group, hey, I'm looking at a SaaS for this. Anybody have any recommendations, or what do you hate? Or you go do a Reddit forum, etc. But for us, this is very, very much the case. So a lot of our optimization activities are on a full refresh to our ambassador program, and then all the enablement activities that come with that, and then brightening up our presence with our primary affiliates. All that stuff was dated. Our web, the messaging, the screenshots of the product, all that stuff needed love. It was about 18 months old. And then obviously in terms of a system, that is a going concern for the business, all those relationships. So you need to make sure that you're brightening stuff up, that you're keeping things fresh on probably at least a 6-month cadence, depending on how fast you're moving on product. But regardless, if that stuff gets stale, you'll start to see diminishing returns from those channels. All right, y'all. Holy smokes. We just are buzzing right through it. So took a look at the scorecard, took a look at MRR, user growth. We looked at OKRs and execution in our diagnosis of each OKR. We're going to now move into, I guess, a level of abstraction above kind of the OKR diagnosis and kind of pulling those things together into big learning lessons. So at the top of the list, frameworks. God, ideally your whole thought process and the way you get down generally is a function of, it's if you think about like a Lego toy, it's like ideally you have these mental models and these frameworks that are just Legos that stack together. And then when something breaks down, you can quickly pinpoint, okay, it's this framework that's faulty. And then you can just switch the Lego block and you can go. But if you don't have kind of an established Lego toy of these frameworks and your thought is just kind of spaghetti, or you don't really have documented frameworks or principles for how you attack different domains in business, it's very hard to diagnose what's going wrong and figure out how to replace it. So for implementing tech, this is a RevOps domain. I want to see us apply much more of like a life cycle framework. So let's just think, okay, there's a life cycle to our efforts in implementing technology, and then we foot project plans to that, and we foot systems and kind of rhythms to that as well. So one way to think about implementing tech is, establishing the required business impact. Obviously, like, why are we buying this thing? Why are we implementing this thing? What results do we need to see in terms of the impact of the business? That's base table stakes. Then moving into vetting vendors via an objective scorecard. Then you implement the new tool, and you keep the existing there in parallel, and both are kind of existing. So you have access to all the historical data. You're not migrating data yet. The system of action is running in parallel. Then you're using the new tool and you fine tune it. Then you sunset the legacy, and then you train everybody on it, and you document and you SOP it. I think we kind of lost some discipline here. And, it's like, hey, let's implement it. Cool. Away we go. And let's do it all at once. And we lost sight of the notion that implementing tech is very much follows a life cycle framework. God, this one, I say this out loud to myself all the time. So the cardinal sin, or I guess by way of analogy or metaphor, if you go into the gym, you're like, oh, I'm gonna, for all my, fitness enthusiasts out there, it's like, hey, I want to bench press 300 pounds. And it's like, okay, that maybe not very likely that you're going to achieve that, but mostly it depends on what do you bench now and what's the timeline for achieving that goal. It's like, okay, you bench 200 pounds now. If you can add 10 pounds to your bench a month, it's going to take you 2 years to bench 300 pounds if you kind of are genetically predisposed to ever get to 300 pounds. But simply put, goals are a function of base rates and marginal improvement over time. And you probably don't want to swing for a 20% improvement, at least on a monthly basis, or greater than a 20% improvement month over month. I think beyond that, it's a little bit ambitious. And then you kind of set the business up to be in a place where it looks like you're missing on goals. And that can kill morale, and that's just not great for culture. But goals are a function of base rates and marginal improvement. God damn it. Next one was, clearly identify the work streams and decisions that need cross-functional collaboration, and then bake collaborative steps into the actual work stream. So it's like, okay, we're launching a new website. Got it. Cool. And that's going to influence trial signups, which pipes into the back end of our product. That's going to capture lead forms and stuff like that, which is going to pipe into our CRM. Okay, so we've got RevOps and product and marketing. They need to snap together at some stage, because that activity cuts across all three of those things, and everybody needs to be on the same page. And I think we missed a little bit in just a simple conversation like, cool, who are the parties that are involved in this? Great, let's have them check in when this thing is a third baked and 2/3 baked and before we launch. So it sounds simple, and obviously, as I've said, hindsight's 2020, but just simple. This is a collaborative work stream. Cool. What are the collaboration steps that are baked into the task, and how do we make sure that those kind of moments of collaboration happen? Okay. Operating leverage is a function of building playbooks and delegating low impact tasks, not delegating playbook builds or owning the entire scope of the work stream such that the owner is bogged down in low impact activities. So what does this mean? I think you want to establish yourself, if you think about activities as a pyramid, Like let's just say, hey, we're going to do, X playbook. Ideally, you don't outsource the entire playbook because the correctness of that playbook is going to generate tremendous leverage for the business. It's a rinse and repeat. You strip the thinking, you de-risk execution. You never want to outsource the entire playbook. Ideally, you're outsourcing the bottom third of the pyramid. So administrative tasks, busy work, stuff like that. So it's less about like, hey, let's outsource the pyramid, and it's more so like, let's delegate and outsource the very bottom of the pyramid so that we, as business operators and executives and leaders, are focusing on the most high impact activities, high leverage activities, repeatable systems, et cetera, versus outsourcing the whole thing or owning the pyramid top to bottom such that you have to execute on those administrative tasks, et cetera. And that takes away from your ability to hit the high impact stuff, because that's obviously operating leverage is the name of the game. To hours is the only thing that you can't scale. You only got 24 every day. So you need to make sure that you're absolutely fixated on the stuff that, is the biggest bang for your buck. And lastly, and this is actually, I should have put this one first. This is probably one of my favorites, but when you get in and you buy a business, find a power user or a few. And, there's a lot of conversation around like a customer steering committee, et cetera. But I wish we would have been maybe a little more structure around this, where it's like, all right, who are 2 or 3 of our power users? Cool. Let's incentivize the shit out of these people, whether we pay them for an hourly huddle once a week, or we incentivize them with a rev share, whatever it is. Get creative and figure out what incentives matter to your power users, obviously, before you craft those types of plans. But the insight that they can provide is insane. It's like, hey, they're your target personas. You can learn so much empathy that way. They can provide insights on the product roadmap. They can help you figure out which channels and acquisition tactics are going to hit. And it's, as I noted here, it's worth every freaking penny. So do it. Find your insiders, so to speak, and get them incentivized and on the boat rowing. Cool. Now to change gears into top achievements and highlights. So we have a fully refreshed support content, which was an absolute beast. So you can think of this as support content and product documentation, but this was a huge lift and just tremendous leverage and highly repeatable. All the stuff that we're looking to do. So we're really proud of that. We've got to consult our total tech stack, RevOps stuff is behind us. We're absolutely buzzing now. And we learned a shitload about that. And then our content jumpstart is well underway. So, obviously with ChatGPT, generative AI is the headline here. On the content side, obviously, depending on how niche, the content you get is only going to be as good as the volume or the density of information that's interesting and accurate on the internet. So, and with that, I think there's a stat that's like, it's like 2/3 of human knowledge is still between our ears, right? And especially the most bleeding edge stuff is usually cooked up in people's heads. And it's not all over the internet, and it's not, all up in a training model data set for any kind of generative or LLM based tool. So, so I guess my comment there is sometimes it's not applicable. If you're selling, SaaS for neuroscientists, maybe not for you, but if it's pretty straightforward, generative AI is just an extraordinary arbitrage moment right now to just jumpstart content. So it's like, hey, here's our buyer journey. Here are the kind of assets that we need at each stage in the journey. What are the gaps? Cool. Big jumpstart. Bam, let's go. And then obviously you can't use it for client case studies. You can't use it for very product specific stuff, but in terms of business fundamentals, concepts that are universally applicable across your entire category, it is an extraordinary way to get from a blog post that has 2 posts to 50 overnight. And ideally that just gives you surface area to test. So you just push it out into the world, see what's driving engagement, and then you kind of course correct the content plan from there. But we got the content absolutely buzzing. And then our ambassador program is out of the gates ripping. And that is a lot of enablement, a lot of coaching, and just a lot of thought and being delicate and keeping complex stuff simple, which takes time. And that's that. My goodness, I'm running out of breath over here. Cool. So I think we can probably move to wraps. Yeah. So just generally speaking, I think we're feeling good. We're feeling good. Obviously, we always want to demand more of ourselves. We want to be kind of perpetually lifting the bar. But we've gotten to a place where most of the fix and improve stuff is in the rear view, and now it's time to fixate on growth, and that's exciting for everybody. Product enhancements, users get jazzed, acquisition's fun. You learn about channels, you learn about the market, and that's where we're at now. So, and for me, growth is my religion, and across all walks of life, grow what's good, as I've said in the past. And now we're finally getting to the growth bits. And damn, it feels good. And I'm optimistic. I think we're all optimistic. We're jazzed about the business. We're having fun. And I'm excited for the future. Hopefully this was useful. Yeah, shit. See you next month. God bless SaaS. Check you later.